I'm quite excited about tonight's topic. We are going to be looking at speciesism and oppression of animals as sort of a function of, or a symptom of a system of oppression. To set the stage, sort of, we're going to be talking specifically about the intersection of LGBTQ, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer identities and activism, and animals and animal liberation. And to sort of set the stage, I'd like to propose some correlations that exist, at a very high level. So, for example, there's the central role of activism and advocacy, which are fundamental to both communities. There's mainstream acceptance and prejudice of LGBTQ people, which is central, and vegans at the same time. And then there's the violence visited upon LGBTQ people disproportionately, and the violence inflicted on animals. As well, we have stereotypes, and for example, often veganism is associated with effeminacy, or in fact, if you're a woman vegan, you might be assumed to be a lesbian. So there's those sort of connections as well. There's a sense of resistance and pride that exists in both the LGBTQ and vegan communities. There's obviously the central and inhibiting and also perhaps protective role, in some cases, of legislation, politics, and on a personal note, there's the experience of coming out as either an LGBTQ person or as a vegan, and it's sometimes with parents it's hard to tell what's more traumatic for them. Anyway, these are some connections, and I don't actually know what the panelists will be talking about, but keep your ears open for some of these connections that they may make. And who are our panelists? Well, to my left is Paul Jenkins, and Paul Jenkins cultivates an eclectic musical career. Cultivates is something like cobbles together.
Yeah. Freelance.
As a keyboardist and a tenor, and I'm actually amazed you're able to make a living with that. That's great. He's been virtually vegan for the past 3 years. And our next up will be Sammy Arnold, who is over here to my right. Sammy is an animal rights activist who has been vegan for almost 5 years and works as a social service worker, and has come to us from Oshawa, right? That's where you live.
Yep.
So thanks for making the trek in. And our third and final presenter, or panelist, is Jade Wallace, who's sitting next to Sammy. And Jade is a vegan and anti-speciesist with an MA in Social Justice and Equity Studies. She works at a legal aid clinic, and she has a band called the Leafy Greens, which sometimes sings about animals and the environment. And I think we can find Leafy Greens concert footage on YouTube, right, Jade? Good. Well, a very interesting group. And with that, I'd like to welcome you all, and I'm going to turn the podium over to Paul first.
Thank you. The only other time I've ever spoken on any subject, really, was as an activist in the 80s at the Fraser Commission on Pornography. I made a deputation there, and that's a long time ago. So I may be a bit rusty, but I don't want to discuss much more than this issue of extra and how I relate to it in my history. I was at a dinner at the end of this year with several of the founders of Pink Triangle Press that goes back to the 1970s, and it was a buffet dinner that had your regular meat and potatoes type stuff, and it had vegetarian options and it had vegan options, and it was interesting to see who was asking for and interested in which food. There was definitely a contingent of the original collective that is vegan. So I was interested to know that, and this is before this issue came out. So this issue took me by surprise in a way when I usually expect Extra to come out with something mildly titillating or provocative, but this was a shocker for me because I really didn't think it was that crass. I didn't think it was quite this pathetic at this point in history, especially considering what the Body Politic had been through as an organization. I mean, they'd been through lawsuits, extended court cases where the Crown just wouldn't let them go over issues of censorship, basically. And the Body Politic had no fear of dangerous issues, intergenerational sexual relationships, S&M and bondage, at a time when the Christian right was really out there, able to shut this stuff down and to force censorship, basically, which was rife in Toronto years in the 80s and 70s and 80s. So maybe we could just get a flavor of this. Bad. I didn't mean to say flavor. But if we could just get the tone of this video that introduces this issue, maybe.
Hi everyone, this is Phil Villeneuve, and I'm at Sandigan's Meat Locker on location taking photos for our meat issue. Could you please introduce yourself and what you do at this butcher shop?
Hi, I'm Steve O'Brien. I'm the assistant manager here at Sandigan's Meat Locker.
So, Steve, you've been here since Sandigan's was a tiny little shop. How did it become such a large operation? Why did it become so much bigger?
Attention to detail, a lot of little service things, but really our meat is pretty incredible. A lot of local small Ontario farmers, and their care is shown through our butchery as well. So people have been voting with their palates.
Can you also please explain the extremely high quotient of handsome butchers in this butcher shop? You guys have a reputation.
We have a reputation?
Yeah.
It's meat behind the counter and in the counter?
Like really meat everywhere that everyone wants to look at.
Wow, they've all got great personalities too. Absolutely.
I'm here with Lisa, the head butcher at Sandigan's. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
So, can you explain what you're doing right here?
Yeah, for sure. So I cut up some chops on the bandsaw, and now I'm just scraping the fat off them before we put them in the window.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Can you explain maybe what some of the more interesting cuts are back here that you guys work with? Are there some weird cuts that we've never even thought of back here?
Probably. First thing that comes to mind is offal. So like the insides of animals.
Yeah.
Things like hearts, livers. Sometimes people ask for brain. Yeah, stuff like that. That isn't super common. We don't usually put it in the window, but
it's available if they want it.
pretty much, yeah.
You heard it here, everyone. There are brains available at Sandigan's. How much of your day is taken up by handling meat?
All of it, I would say. You get the odd bit of downtime, but we're pretty consistently busy, so there's always someone to help out and to handle meat for.
Can you maybe also, since you're working so much with meat, talk about why meat has become so popular lately in this city? Why is everyone so meat hungry?
I think it's more about kind of reconnecting with your farmer, reconnecting with the rural environment as well, knowing who's producing for you, and just knowing that what you're getting is a quality product, something that's been raised naturally. And if you can provide that, people are going to engage with you on a much deeper level, I think.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a lifestyle promotional thing for people to go out and buy meat. And it's not just any meat. It's not. I mean, you think of all the words in the lexicon that the meat allusions we have: tenderloin, beefcake, chicken hock, pigs, bears. I mean, these are all terms that are applied to people, and so there is this awareness of the objectification of people. I mean, the political history is full of very intelligent writing. I mean, if you look at the history of body politic, it's full of great analyses of social systems and relationships, and so this was a shocker. One of the writers who has most to do with this meat issue really is about promoting the products as being humane and sustainable, and they talk a little bit about how happy these animals might have been, and it's totally greenwashed, and they describe the settings of the store as being covered with barnwood, as if to think that the animals were brought up in barns or in some rustic kind of old-fashioned way, where back when things were better, if they ever were. There is quite a provocative review on one of these restaurants, La Palette, which is featured here with Séraphin Labrivière, and he talks about how the owner of this restaurant really did want to create mischievous, infectious sense of humor, he calls it, by putting various animal parts together and to create a little animal sculpture. There's a famous Czech animator who did this kind of thing with dead meat.
Didn't allow pellet. They were protested for serving horse meat.
Horse meat, but also goose liver.
Foie gras.
Pardon me?
Foie gras.
Foie gras, that's it, yes. They have an entree called quack and track, which is duck confit served with horse tenderloin. And he creates a sculpture using sausage casing with a confit duck head. You can crack the beak open and eat the cheeks. Watch out, he's got a tongue. This is the kind of thing that is being promoted in this lifestyle magazine. There's no sense of balance in this. When I did a search on extra.ca, I found 4 pages when I typed in vegan of results. But when I typed in meat, I had like 560 pages of results. So I did go through the 4 pages of results to see what else Extra was talking about. And they did have an article on Lady Gaga's meat dress and what that means for fashion. Very confused. There didn't seem to be any kind of coherent logic to what Lady Gaga was about, or their take on it. And aside from restaurant reviews, you do get the occasional mention of something vegan. Avoiding beef with your vegan partner, and this is talking about respecting choice. Don't call him a meat-eating animal murderer. Well, I don't think we're going to be doing that to our partners. Compromise. Okay, so make sure that your plates are separate so that you don't get your meat juice on his plate. Or set some ground rules. It's not always about food. Now they do talk about what else there is about veganism in terms of products that you can buy. Products that have no animal testing, avoiding leather and wool, that kind of thing. I don't know if you have the picture of Zachary Koval, but he was a poster boy for one issue in 2012. He's the only one I know of, and he's a poster boy for PETA, a vegan bodybuilder, and his picture was featured largely in that issue in 2012. Then there was Ellen DeGeneres, an invitation for her to join the free vegan mealtimes in Dundas Square 3 years ago. And somebody, Gene Bauer, I think it might be familiar to some people, did a video dancing around that area of town in a music video to promote this big vegan event on August 10th of 2011. I don't know if anyone went to that. I didn't hear about it.
I think so.
This was one of the Miss Universe Canada, the only trans contestant who is vegan and has done promotions for PETA. And that's her picture. Her name is Jenna Taklakova. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly. Yeah. So there's not much in Extra Magazine. And we did, Paul and I did put together a letter into Letters to the Editor, which was not published. However, Paul posted it. So I'll just read this letter and wrap it up there. I think that's my 10 minutes. To the editors of Extra, how shockingly insensitive to choose an image of animals' butchered body parts for the cover of this issue. This was in January. A paper by and for the LGBT community should be expected to stand for social justice and equality for all, not selectively discriminating against other sentient beings just because of the way they look. These creatures have emotions, minds, thoughts, and the capacity to love. They are persons in every meaningful sense of the word. To promote discrimination against them runs contrary to everything that Extra should stand for. And Extra, as a publication of Pink Triangle Press, had a motto, and it's the outcome we seek is this: gay and lesbian people daring together to set love free. That's from the 70s. It didn't include LGBTQ the way it does today, but that was the motto of the magazine. And they chose the pink triangle as a symbol of oppression, because of course that's what gay men, I guess mostly, in World War II were forced to wear with Jews in the concentration camps. It was half of the Star of David, just the pink triangle. So this publisher ought to have known better. However, oughts and shoulds are, easy to say. For those who who would answer that eating other animals is natural, I would simply remind them that the same naturalistic argument has been used to justify homophobia. Heteronormativity is really no different than species essentialism, which draws a sharp distinction between species, placing humans in the position of master and non-humans in the position of slave. This kind of attitude forgets an essential fact. Human beings are animals too, not higher or lower, according to Darwin. This means that we have a moral obligation not to harm our fellow earthlings. This issue's editorial exposes the true banality of the evil of animal slavery, cloaked in tired euphemisms. People in the city are craving a less manufactured experience. They now want to meet the person who chopped their chicken. And they talk about the killer good looks the butchers provide is a delicious bonus. This is the kind of language that was used in the editorial. I would like to ask the editor, Phil, have you ever tasted dog meat, a prized delicacy in horrific barbarism in parts of the world where our schizoid attitude to animals isn't completely shared? There was another line that from the editorial. There's a warm feeling walking into any of these locations, these butcher shops. Really, a warm feeling. I invite Phil to attend a vigil at a processing facility in minus 20-degree weather to witness animals frostbitten and hyperthermic after a dozen or more hours on the road, screaming in pain as they're prodded with electric weapons toward the killing floor. The terms humane and sustainable cannot really reasonably be used to describe meat production, no matter how it might be touted as organic or free range. A new promo image of free-range chickens being suffocated under a layer of foam, a process that takes at least 15 minutes to kill them, is easy to find online. The humane myth is simply a public relations tool by the industry to assuage consumer guilt and participating in structural violence. The slaughter of animals for food was once necessary for survival. It now threatens our survival in many ways, through increased risk of heart disease and cancer caused by eating animal protein and fat, as documented by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, through water pollution, excessive water use, greenhouse gas emissions from the livestock industry, as documented in Livestock's Long Shadow. I think that you mentioned that, this 2006 publication from the United Nations. And not least the World Health Organization and other medical organizations who are concerned that crowding of livestock increases the risk of all kinds of bacterial and viral diseases. You can do more for social justice and the environment by becoming vegan than any other single act. The editors of Pink Triangle Press would do well to have a serious look at these issues and reread their original mission statement, particularly the pledge to change our downcast state. Well, what about the downcast state of other species, enslaved and exploited and discriminated against? And we ended with Martin Luther King's line, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So that's all I have to say on this topic. Thanks.
I just have to say that it's really shocking that they didn't publish that. Like, they just pushed it aside.
And no response of any kind.
They didn't
Not even one of those generic thank you for
No.
your concern type things.
No, it was definitely received. I mean, it definitely went to their mailbox. Yeah.
So my name is Sam Eban Arnold. I'm genderqueer, I'm 24 years old, and I spearhead a grassroots initiative called Sustainable Action Durham. Throughout childhood, my parents did take me to a few union rallies, but I didn't start attending protests on my own until I was 20, and that was the G20 4 years ago in Toronto. I've been vegan since September of 2009, and I was vegetarian for 11 years before that. I graduated from Durham College with a diploma in social service worker in the spring of 2010, and I now do independent contract work one-on-one with clients that have mental health issues. Currently, I focus my attention on sustainability because I'm still able to promote veganism. Encouraging people to grow a backyard garden helps them see that where their food is coming from, which helps them draw the connection from meat, dairy, and eggs to the actual sentimental animal that it's coming from, rather than just that it comes from the store mentality that I find westernized people are all too guilty of thinking. And having an organic backyard garden is also a great tool I find for any activist because it's the best way to fight consumerism. It makes being vegan a lot cheaper as well as easier, and it encourages a local food market as well as barter system while being a great activity for reducing stress. Which is an important lifestyle factor that I often see activists selflessly overlooking. But where that comes into being an issue is that you do need to be able to love yourself in order to spread love to others, which to me is what activism is really all about. I was first introduced to sociology in grade 11, so when I was about 16. I fell in love with it above any other social science, and one of the first things I noticed was that all marginalized populations are fighting the same ignorance and injustice that stems from the hierarchy of our society. I did notice similarities between the oppression of humans and the oppression of animals. However, I wasn't able to properly phrase these thoughts eloquently until I was well into college. I took every class for an addictions and mental health graduate certificate, but I didn't complete that field placement. And while taking the graduate certificate, I wrote a paper for my class, Violence in Society, based off a piece of media that portrayed violence in society. I chose to write my paper about earthlings, and I'd never written a formal essay that turned into be like such a personal experience in my life. I put pieces together that I'd never seen before and thought in completely new ways afterwards. I don't know if anyone here has seen Earthlings. I would not recommend writing a paper on it because you have to then watch it like 4 or 5 times and like backtrack and everything, and it was very emotionally trying. I remember discussing the tragedy at a circus with Tyke the elephant, killed her trainer, mauled her groomer, and bolted from the arena. She was murdered by local police and citizens who shot her 86 times, and it took her over 2 hours to die. There's a great deal of violence used to train circus elephants, as well as there is with any animal who is forced to perform for our arbitrary entertainment. Also, there is the trauma of children seeing an elephant kill one person and severely injure another. And lastly, there was a lot of violence there perpetuated by humans against Tyke to stop her from causing more destruction, even though my main thing was, why don't you have tranquilizer guns on hand if you're working with an elephant? The strongest tie between heteronormativity and speciesism is oppression. Transphobia and heteronormativity oppress people who fall under the trans umbrella, whereas speciesism oppresses animals and any species that is not human. This oppression marginalizes both populations throughout various tiers of society, such as social norms, the media, and consumerism are the 3 key factors as to why these acts of oppression and marginalization do exist. Through social norms, we are assigned roles and boxes that we must fit into from birth if we want to be quote-unquote normal. We are often raised with expectations in place that we feel we must abide by in order to be accepted by society. Likewise, social norms impose speciesism into our daily lives that we feel we must abide by. These social norms are not discussed, so they're not always the easiest things to see and be aware of. The social norms say that women wear dresses, makeup, need to use a lot of beauty and personal care products, be clean-shaven at all times, while being sexy and seductive without being slutty. But you can't be a prude. So that's the social norms for women right there. Hopefully they're not too difficult for you guys. And whereas men on the other hand...
Sounds exhausting.
Yeah. Whereas men on the other hand, you guys just have to wear flannels, suits, shave, and grow a beard at the same time, while acting as macho and manly as possible. I know that these are both very extreme examples, but the goal is to portray the binary as clearly as possible. Both the norms imposed for men and women are harmful and detrimental to the goal of having a truly equal society. Does a man lose his masculinity when he wears a dress, or does a woman stop being feminine when she stops shaving or waxing? Of course not. Yet these social norms that are in place imply that this is the case. Similarly, social norms affect the way we view and interact with every other species on the planet. We have embedded a hierarchical speciesism into our social norms in a way not done with any other marginalized population by our current civilization. Although there are parallels, they are not identical. Animal exploitation and abuse are the most rampant and common forms of oppression in society. A social situation where speciesism and heteronormativity constantly overlap is at dinners and gatherings. Often the vast majority of food served at such gatherings contains animal products in some way or another. Often there are dress codes, or at least an informal expectation of how to dress, and those are always based on gender roles. And with just 2 aspects of this one gathering, we've already led to heteronormativity as well as speciesism being present in these events. This is applicable to both vegan and the LGBT lifestyles throughout various daily activities. The media forces us into gender-segregated cookie-cutter roles and stereotypes. This is everywhere in our advertisements, clothing trends, and other aspects of the media. The media is an outlet for social norms to be portrayed. Advertisements are everywhere that tell genders what is acceptable attire, products, and behavior while using these products. In the same sense, animals are oppressed through advertising in mainstream media. We can see meat companies advertising happy animals when, in fact, we know that factory farms and the slaughter industry put animals through unimaginable torture and anguish. We are told that animal products are healthy when studies show that this is not the case. The media is constantly advertising meat, dairy, and eggs towards us. And then the media constantly advertising these things leads to consumerism. Consumerism is a driving force that keeps both heteronormativity as well as speciesism perpetuating throughout society. Animals are exploited through mass genocide for profit, whereas humans are convinced to hold unrealistic expectations about our bodies so the corporations can profit from our insecurities. There isn't one part of our capitalist society that can be isolated and blamed for heteronormativity or speciesism. The social norms in the media are two of the main driving forces behind consumerism in Western civilization. Every company is trying to sell us their products so we fit in and appear to be as normal as possible. But all the while, you still have to be yourself, but be unique within the box. We are conditioned by society to believe conforming to norms will make us happy. Companies do not want us to find happiness within ourselves, but within their products. Consumerism can drive people to judge others based on possessions as well as appearances. Equality movements such as veganism, vegetarianism, feminism, the LGBT, and many, many others are all fighting for people to find happiness in our own love and compassion rather than blindly following the social norms that are only in place to directly or indirectly promote consumerism. Have you guys seen those new pens that Bic just came out with? The pens for women? Yes. Yeah. Bic, by the way, tests on animals as well, if you guys didn't know that. When I first saw these pens, my first mental image was of a cis woman using a pen, having a cis male ask to borrow it, and her responding with, "Sorry, this is a girl's pen, you can't use it." And of course, these pens are pink to promote the norm that pink's the girl's color and men can't use it. Although sexism is not heteronormativity, understanding the patriarchal imbalance in society overlaps in understanding heteronormativity. The girls' pens are not only promoting heteronormativity, but also sexism. Imposed heterosexual roles overlaps sexism. The gender binary is so closely linked to feminism in modern society, it is impossible to explore aspects of one and not the other. The binary becomes even more blurred when one analyzes what it means when we're protesting. We have often heard cynics say that veganism is sexist. This is a regular occurrence when part of a demonstration involves costumes that show a lot of skin, especially when there are more women than men at attendance at a protest, which, if you guys have ever been to any animal rights demonstrations, you'd know it's typically the 80% women, 20% male approximate in attendance, but it varies from cause to cause, obviously. However, women are making a choice to express themselves, and the gender binary is what makes it different for women to have a lot of skin showing at these demonstrations versus a man having a lot of skin showing at these demonstrations. Well, there is no physical difference between the outside of a woman's breast and a man's breast. When I was really young, like 4 or 5 maybe, I loved playing soccer with all the other neighborhood kids. When we played shirts and skins, I often ended up on the skins team, so I would be coming home topless. And to me, there was no difference between what boys could do and what I could do. And at that age, I didn't see myself as a girl already, so really there was no difference between my chest and the chest of the other kids that I was playing with, which, at least from my point of view. My parents really disagree with me on that one. But the weird thing was, my friends at the time didn't care. I didn't look any different, and if one of them would question me as to why I wasn't wearing a shirt, all I had to say was, "So what? You don't have yours on either." And in the innocence of childhood, before the social norms were embedded, the other boys that I was playing with would always just understand, like, "Oh, you know what? They don't have their shirt on. I don't have my shirt on either. There's no real difference. Let's get back to the game. Who cares?" And depending on your standpoint, the root of this could be patriarchal, heteronormal, or a combination of both influencing the norms of our society. The gender binary heavily influences the clothing we wear in our daily lives. The gender binary needs to stop being applied to clothing. If a man buys a dress, he owns it. So technically it stops being women's clothing at that point. At protests, the gender binary can become a huge issue for trans and queer people. This is because costumes are often made to conform to the black and white gender binary that we have embedded into our society. Women need to keep more skin and body parts covered, while men only need to wear shorts for it to be a socially acceptable protest. Because of gender roles in society and my body type, I'm expected to wear the women's swimsuit top or something to cover my torso. While this expectation is notable in all aspects of my life, it somehow becomes more evident in movements such as animal rights that are fighting for equality. 3 years ago, trigger warning for sexual violence in this though. 3 years ago, while protesting the Shriner Circus in Oshawa, I was wearing a bikini top just because I didn't feel like getting into an argument with the police as to why I was topless on the street corner. So this was during the major heat wave that was like 3 years ago, and it was literally 50 degrees Celsius out that day. Most of the protesters were in our swimsuits, and I don't know why I was isolated above any of the other protesters. Maybe it's because I was the person leading the chant, so the circus patron felt to isolate me because of that. But word for word, she told me I deserved to be raped because of the way I was dressed. And this really added insult to injury because I would rather just be topless, but the social norms regarding my body type made me stick out like a sore thumb. It's unfortunate that physical features and body types are still associated with gender. However, society is far from being perfect, so at demonstrations, I still have to be in the closet to a certain extent. While sexism and heteronormativity are different concepts, they overlap in a lot of ways, and this is due to them both being byproducts of our patriarchal society. And like I said, it's impossible to get into one without the other. All marginalized populations and equality movements are fighting for the same thing: freedom of expression, whether it's animals being free to live their own lives as they please, as well as people being able to express themselves and live comfortably in their own skin. It isn't wrong for someone to identify as cis or within a gender binary. What I would like, though, is for people outside of the binary to have the same privileges as the people within it. There's nothing wrong with preferring to be one gender over the other, or nothing wrong with not having a gender at all. Equality is about giving the oppressed more privileges than they already have, thus raising their status to being equal with the privileged populations. It's not about oppressing the privileged down to where marginalized populations are already struggling. We should be coming together in solidarity to fight oppression, not be using it as weapons against one another. This also needs to happen within the animal rights movement. Veganism is about spreading love and compassion and is strongly tied to human rights and standing in solidarity with one another. This is done by extending the compassion we feel towards animals, towards all humans and human rights issues.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm going to divide my presentation sort of into 3 parts. So the first part is going to be just kind of a personal contextualization of how the issues of animal advocacy and queer advocacy have, affected my own life. I'll try to keep that one brief. The second part is going to be kind of a general understanding of how conceptually and practically animal advocacy and queer advocacy are linked. And then the third part, I'm going to look at a particular example of an issue where I think that the comparisons between animal advocacy and queer advocacy are particularly obvious and important. So to talk about myself for a moment, I was raised in a very small town. I went to a Catholic high school, so you can imagine I was very straight and meat-eating for most of my life. Because incidentally, kind of as soon as I left high school, I started questioning all of these sets of beliefs that I just sort of unconsciously adopted throughout my life. And the vegetarianism and later veganism kind of came at the same time as I became aware of my own queer identity. Now I identify as bisexual, by which I take to mean the idea that I'm attracted to both the same and other genders. And I'm currently a vegan. If you ask me what my ideological ideas, I'd say I'm definitely anti-speciesist. And the kind of personal overlap for me between the interest in queer rights and the interest in animal rights is something I actually see mirrored in a lot of other people who I share my life with. And I'd actually be interested, like, Ian, you brought up at the beginning, you said you're going to talk about, like, correlations between the two, and I was like, I wish we had some statistics on whether there's a higher proportion of vegans in the queer population or not. I'd be fascinated to know. But anyways.
That's a study you can do.
I'll work on it. So that's kind of my personal context for where I came at this issue. This is why I assume Ian asked me to be here. So I just want to talk generally about kind of the framework that I think links animal advocacy and queer advocacy. So as the other two presenters alluded to, I think the main way to look at them as linked is through a framework of anti-oppression. And an anti-oppressive approach to ethics is based on the idea that, quote, different forms of oppression need to be understood as component parts of a whole system of domination. That's MacDonald and Coleman. And as Marjorie Spiegel said in The Dreaded Comparison, any oppression helps to support other forms of domination. So I guess an anti-oppressive framework firstly assumes that different forms of oppression and different hierarchies, they're all linked in conceptual and practical ways. So the kind of rhetoric that bolsters one form of oppression can also be used to bolster another form of oppression. And that by questioning one, you kind of almost logically have to question the others. And so an anti-oppressive approach to social justice advocacy is useful because it allows us to look critically at the commonalities between different types of oppression and to address them in similar ways, and for different rights advocates to work together. So animal advocates can learn from and work with queer advocates within an anti-oppressive framework. This makes perfect sense. And the other tenet, I guess, of anti-oppression that I want to talk about is this idea that you can't actually have an anti-oppressive society unless you eliminate all forms of oppression. Like, you can't, have freedom for queer people and not freedom for animals. You're still living in an essentially hierarchical and oppressive society. It's just, the terms are different. So I guess one of the goals of anti-oppressive ethics is to undercut this idea that there needs to be oppression, or there needs to be hierarchies, or there needs to be domination in order for society to be functional, and that we can actually have a society without these concepts that we rely so consistently on. So now the particular example that I wanted to focus on is an idea that I was only introduced to seriously very recently, actually, when I started doing the research for this particular presentation. And it's vegan sexuality, as like a term, vegan sexuality. And it was defined in a 2007 New Zealand study, and it was looked at more closely by Annie Potts and Jovian Perry in 2010 in their paper Vegan Sexuality, Challenging Heteronormativity and Masculinity Through Meat-Free Sex. So the idea of vegan sexuality it's kind of on its own little spectrum. And on the one hand, you have people who have a preference for partners who are vegan or vegetarian or whatever. On the other hand, you have the aversion to meat-eating partners. And so this is actually a thing that people have studied statistically. And obviously, this is probably not a surprise to anyone that it received a ton of backlash in the media, in internet forums. And when we talk about vegan sexuality, I'm going to step back a moment. When we talk about vegan sexuality, it's obviously not one of these kind of like isolated sexual orientations. So like it overlaps, of course, with some like other sexual orientations a person might have, like whether they're queer or whether they're straight or whatever else. But the idea behind vegan sexuality, I think, is not so much that it's some kind of innate or biological sexual orientation, though that is still a valid sexual orientation in that it literally orients people's relationships and with each other and their interactions. And so what Perry and Potts suggest in their paper is that the majority of criticism of it came from meat-eating straight men, unsurprisingly again. And their theory is that it's because vegan sexuality challenges Western patriarchal links between virility, masculinity, and meat-eating. So, as usual, anytime you try to challenge people in a certain position of privilege, they give you a lot of flack back and tell you are being oppressive. And so yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is if we look at vegan sexuality as an example of a particular sexuality that is, you know, kind of so non-mainstream and considered deviant, and we compare it to, say, homosexuality, which relatively has gotten, you know, a lot more widespread acceptance, I think, than vegan sexuality has, arguably. But the point is that we can actually, I think, learn things by comparing the treatment of these two concepts in mainstream discourse. So with homosexuality, what we've seen is a lot of rhetoric that tries to argue that homosexuality is somehow natural, that it's biological, and has tried to that's been used as an argument for why homosexuality is okay, and that it's comparable to heterosexuality in that way. Not exclusively, that's not the only arguments in favor of homosexuality, but it's certainly been one of them, and it's been very common. Now, when you contrast that to vegan sexuality, that's certainly not an argument that we can easily make. It's pretty hard to say that vegan sexuality is just something innate and biological. It's much more social, political, personal. And we recognize that. And so the problem here becomes that if you adopt a rhetoric of homosexuality is okay as long as it's natural, you realize that that kind of rhetoric can't really be applied to other sexual orientations like vegan sexuality. And if you're looking at this all through an anti-oppressive framework, to say that people can't have agency about who they choose to have sexual relationships with is extremely problematic. And to say that your sexual orientation should only be based on whatever your natural or biological inclinations are, and that should be privileged over whatever social, political, and personal inclinations you have is, you know, we can see where this is like an issue, because it's prioritizing a certain understanding of human beings over their own choice and volition about how they want to construct themselves and their personal relationships. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you take an argument like this idea of homosexuality is natural or biological, and you try to apply it to other sexualities and you find it doesn't quite fit, well, then maybe we have to question that argument that says we have to construe our sexualities as biological and natural in order for them to be valid. We have to question whether that's actually an anti-oppressive tactic or not. You know, is that a good foundation for our queer advocacy, to try and ground our queer identities in what is biological and natural, when it's fairly, I would say, a very limited strategy, because it doesn't apply in other situations. And it's even been used against like homosexual people and bisexual people and queer people. You know, every time a study comes out, like, bisexual men don't exist because scientists have shown that they're only aroused when they respond to one sex, or whatever. I mean, like, studies like these have been done, and they might later, if someone gets funding, be counteracted by other research. But, like, that still becomes a problem. To me, that's a very problematic strategy to value, as I said, biological and natural inclinations over people's own autonomy about their bodies. So, in summary, I guess, if we're looking at vegan sexuality, I think it's like a useful kind of studying point for people who are queer advocates to look at vegan sexuality as kind of something that's part of animal advocacy peripherally. And I mean, I think there's some really salient lessons. So that was just one example I was thinking of where I think different rights advocates kind of getting together and talking to each other and even working together when it's fruitful is actually extremely useful. So I guess in conclusion, what I want to say is that, like, an anti-oppressive framework really in general encourages alliances, coalitions, and discussion amongst different types of advocates and activists and writers. And so that to me is where animal advocacy and queer advocacy interact most importantly. Thank you.
Thank you.